Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm Daniel Torres. When I'm not hosting this podcast, I'm the Director of Executive Search at Dwyer Partners, recruiting top talents in the consumer and retail industries. And guess who we speak here in this podcast? Indeed, with top talent, leaders and luminaries in the consumer and retail industries. We're now over 150 episodes in, so do go into our website or your favorite podcast platform to entertain yourself and hopefully be educated with some of the industry's top voices. And do remember, we're part of a family of podcasts headed by the CPG guys in the US. You should tune into them to learn all about the consumer goods industry in the other side of the pond in the US. And also, if you haven't yet, remember to follow us on LinkedIn, where you'll be joining a community of 14,000 members and counting. So you can, and now you can also actually find us on Instagram, where we don't have 14,000 members yet, but you'll find other type of content, but also related to our latest and also upcoming content. Last thing, we're going to be at Shop Talk in Barcelona very soon, between the 3rd and 5th of June. So if you're coming, do make sure to reach out. We'll be happy to greet you and even take pictures. So there's a free bar of pictures for you if you want. And also, we'll actually be hosting an exclusive happy hour with tapas the day before, Sunday, June 2nd, in a special location in my city, selected by myself. So reach out if you'd be interested in joining. And we'll probably have another event, which by the time of publishing this podcast will probably already be public, probably on Monday evening. So stay tuned. This adventure wouldn't be the same without my two amazing co-hosts, and today I'm accompanied by one of them, all the way from Athens, Christina Nicolaou. Hey, Christina, how you doing?
Hi, Daniel. I'm doing well, and I really cannot believe the 14,000 number. It seems quite high and much higher versus where we were a year ago.
I know, 14,000 will actually qualify as a small city here, so it's not bad. Maybe we can all
Quite
move
impressive.
into. Maybe we can start like the FMCG Guys bill somewhere.
Well, okay. I can put my former background into good use there. Let's do something.
Yeah, you could be the architect of this new city, right? So let's keep this idea in the like important, not urgent things to do. So, and one of the things I think that both Christina and I love about this doing the podcast is to learn and have fun doing it. So I think that today we're in for a treat. Very excited to speak today with Steph Lilley, General Manager for Reckitt's Hygiene business unit for the UK and Ireland. Welcome, Steph. How are things in Slough, Berkshire?
Good morning. Things in Slough, Berkshire are very sunny actually today, which makes a nice change.
Wow. Well, I have to say that a lot of times that we have UK guests on the show, it's the sunny day. So maybe we bring luck to you guys.
Absolutely. In which case, you should have people from the UK more often.
We have quite a lot. You know that the UK is actually the number one country that listens to us.
Yeah, well, there we go. I'm glad to be representing today.
There you go. Waving the flag. So, Steph, let's start from like with I work in recruitment, as you know, and a lot of times we say that we fall into recruitment. We don't know really how we get into it. How did you fall into FMCG?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I also fell into FMCG, I think. I'm what we technically refer to as a Reckitt baby. I joined Reckitt straight after university. So I finished my master's at the end of August, and about 2 weeks later, I joined Reckitt on the commercial graduate programme. That was 17 years ago, and I've been here ever since.
Oh, impressive. And you started with the graduate program. What were those first roles like? Can you remember a little bit how you were feeling and what were the things that you started doing at the beginning?
Yeah, it was a long time ago, but I had a lot less grey hair. I really loved the graduate program. I mean, I must have done because I stayed afterwards. And in particular, I really loved my sales rotation, which surprised me. So in the commercial graduate program in the UK, we do 1 year in marketing and 1 year in sales. And I assumed I would be a marketeer. I assumed that that's what I would do with my career, that was what I would enjoy. And actually, after my sales rotation, I really loved it. So I stayed in sales, and my first few roles were customer facing. And I didn't know it at the time, but looking back, I think what I really enjoyed was the immediacy of seeing your hard work come to life from working, directly with customers. And so from there, I spent most of my career focused in sales and sales strategy, predominantly in the UK, but then sort of fast forward a number of years. And in 2016, I also moved to Russia and worked in our regional business there for 2 years. And from there, I went and did sales strategy in our global business in Amsterdam, then moved back to the UK to be the sales director for UK Ireland Hygiene in, I think, 2019. So it's taken me everywhere.
Yeah. Whatever happened to you when you wanted to do marketing? Whatever happened with that?
I think I decided that I couldn't care enough about the exact color palette of an advert and the pack. And I couldn't care quite enough about whether the text was like 2 millimeters up or 2 millimeters down. And it occurred to me that I probably didn't have, like, where my attention to detail sat was not in that space. It was far more in, does this number make sense? And, are we going to get this product on this shelf in the right way? So, my strengths definitely were more sales orientated.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that probably marketing, since it's to a point more theoretical, I think it makes sense that that's kind of what you grow up aspiring to, and what's kind of better known when you're not in the industry is the marketing side, because it's what we see. But obviously that customer relationship is super key. I mean, especially in a country like the UK, where retailers are super, super duper powerful and important, that you have the good relationship with them. And Steph, one of the key building blocks to someone's career and type of advice that I give to people early on is to get people management experience. And that's like a science that really hasn't been developed as such, as like what's the best practice or not. But my question, like where I'm going to, like, is what was your first people management experience? How old were you and what was it like?
Oh my God. I don't think I can remember how old I was actually. But my first people management experience was I worked on the Tesco account, and I had 2 people who started reporting to me. And I think there's really interestingly, there are a couple of inflection points, I would say, when you're a leader. The first one is the first time you manage people. The second one is when you start leading people who also lead others. But that first one for me, I must have been maybe in my late 20s. And I think looking back on it, the big shift that happens is around trust and mentality. So when you move from kind of just leading yourself to leading other people, you suddenly have to trust people to deliver something that's got your name on it. And that's quite a big leap that you have to make. And then there's also, I think, a big mentality shift that goes along with that, which is you have to shift your mentality from I do everything, I deliver this, to we deliver this and we deliver this together, and I'm helping other people to deliver something. And I actually found that shift, I think, to be both exciting and terrifying. In fact, I think every time I've moved leadership positions, I found it both exciting and terrifying. And I generally find that to be a good judge for whether or not I'm making, the right move. And what was really difficult for me at the start was how you sort of adapt your style to other people. So I assumed, completely incorrectly, that everybody was like me. So I'm a very action-oriented person. I like to feel as though we're making decisions, we're moving forward, getting things done. And I also am quite a self-starter. I do not like to be managed. And I just assumed everybody would be exactly the same, right? That they would be highly action-orientated and they wouldn't want to be like micromanaged or managed particularly closely, and that they would ask for help when they needed it. And that is not true. Some people do ask for help when they need it. Some people won't ask for help when they need it. They expect their leader to be able to recognize when they need support and help. Some people quite like to have tasks broken down and for you to move them through those tasks one at a time. Some people prefer that you give the end goal and then you let them work towards it in their own way. And that took me a little bit of time to figure out and get used to. And that's probably the biggest learning curve that I had when I first moved into managing people. And then I think probably that, when I moved from leading, just leading people directly to leading a team that were also leading their own teams, that was another massive inflection point. I mean, the level of trust that you have to have at that moment, it goes completely off the chart. You really have to trust the people around you to deliver. And your mentality has to shift again. So I think when you lead a few people or you lead directly a small team, you lead from the front, you're, leading by example, you set all of the right examples yourself. Then when you kind of lead through others, you take that step back, you lead from the back, you're a facilitator, you're not necessarily kind of leading from the front. And that's another big mentality shift that you have to make. And when I took that one, I think it was difficult to get comfortable with that initially. And, I found that quite a challenging place to be because I really, as I said, I'm very action orientated. I like to be the person sort of at the front making decisions. Let's go, let's do this. And I really had to shift from that to being the person asking the right questions and breaking down barriers for the team and facilitating. Because ultimately, I say this to my team when, people that I first meet, I actually don't do anything in my job. Like my job is to facilitate them to do their jobs, to deliver for the business. That's not, I actually don't physically do that much anymore.
Yeah. And also that's the thing, it's impossible to do things because you don't have the visibility of the whole organization. And as you said, you need to trust your direct reports, that they'll manage their direct reports and maybe their direct reports in the right way, no? And that you are like the guardian of that, if you like, probably, no?
Yeah, absolutely. You are the guardian of that. And you have to find a way. It's really interesting. I've done a lot of work on this over the last sort of 18 months to 2 years in particular. And one of the things you have to do is you have to find a way to get comfortable with the fact that you're not going to be involved in every decision. But you also have to find a way to balance that with getting the right knowledge about what's happening across the business so that you can make the big picture decisions and so that you can ask the right questions. And you can connect the dots between kind of what's happening in one part of your business with what's happening in another part of your business. And you will have to find a way to do that doesn't make people feel like they're being micromanaged and also gives your direct reports the autonomy to go and run their businesses in the way that they need to be able to run them. It's a fine balancing act, and one that I sometimes get right and sometimes don't get right.
And as you said, I think you put it really nice, Steph, that it's a very exciting and terrifying journey at the same time. And all those balances that you mentioned, it feels like very much a lot of acrobatics coming in order to be able to do everything at the same time. And it is a very big mentality for someone taking the first step of leadership and then becoming what I think in P&amp we used to say grandparent manager, when you have multiple generations of manager reporting to you. I'm wondering how does this evolve when you also get a cultural shift? So you mentioned that you moved to Russia at some point. So I guess like this must have been a different experience. What did you learn through that transition?
It's a great point. My time in Russia, so I spent just under 2 years there and I lived in Moscow. And I absolutely loved living in Moscow. So it's an incredible city. It's probably one of the best experiences of my life. My husband and I both really loved it. It's also probably the 2 hardest years of my career. Especially the first year was particularly difficult. And I think I learned more in 2 years in Russia than I would have learned in 10 years staying in the UK. And I think that's because there are cultural differences. So, I think I was talking earlier about different managerial styles and how you flex that for different people and different ways of working. That's definitely something that I learned more in Russia than I've ever learned in the UK. But then also the Russian market is incredibly different to the UK market. So the go-to-market model, our brand footprints there, the consumer habits, they're all completely different. And they took me a lot longer to learn than I had anticipated that it would take. And, it was the first time, I think I'd been at Reckitt for nearly 10 years and 9 years when I moved to Russia. And, I hadn't really had a job in a number of years that required me to take a long time to learn. Normally I could move and within sort of 2-3 months, I could do the job pretty well. And then I moved to Russia and it took me probably 9 months really to be able to be competent. And then another 3 months to find some confidence. And then, so it was 12 months before I was really making the impact that I wanted to be making on the business. And so I also learned to have some patience with myself during my time in Russia and to enjoy the learning curve. And working in Russia is also where I learned to ask for help. And so, that is something that I take with me now, I think, into every job. You really, if you are finding something more difficult than you anticipated, the absolute best thing to do is to tell people and get the support that you need, because generally everybody wants you to be successful. You never come across somebody who doesn't want you to succeed. And so it's really important that you ask for support and you ask for help. And I learned that in Russia. And I think if I'd stayed doing jobs that I was very comfortable with, one after another, I would never have learned to ask for help.
Yeah, I think that sometimes putting yourself in a extreme or challenging situation or unusual situation does make us create resources for that contingency, but then are useful for a lifetime, really. So,
yes, for sure. And as I said, like the leadership skills that I learned in Russia, how I learned to flex my style with the team that I worked with, that was, but not just the people that I led, but also the wider organization that I worked with. That was invaluable. And one of the things I learned now that was super interesting is, so my Russian is not great. And now I don't think I can remember any. But obviously I worked with a number of people who also didn't speak great English. So you learn to communicate in really short sentences and to give the exact information that you need to give in the simplest possible way to somebody so that they can understand what you mean, and they do the same back to you. And it really teaches you to be very crisp in your communication. Something that I learned there and then have probably lost again since I moved back. But I definitely kept some of that kind of crisp sharpness of like, this is exactly what I need to tell you and what you need to know.
Which is important when you're, I think, going back to the leadership of leaders, sometimes you need to deliver like very simple like messages, maybe in 3s maximum, that are like the guidelines and the North Star of an organization ultimately. And speaking of which, now fast forward from the Russia experience, you're the general manager for the Hygiene business unit of Reckitt in the UK and Ireland. Can you tell us a bit what this business looks like in terms of like brand, scale?
Sure. So it's a pretty big business. It's got about 200 people, based predominantly in Slough, but with small offices in both Leeds and Dublin as well. The brands that I have in the portfolio include things like Finish, Vanish, Airwick, Harpic, Sillet Bang, and then some kind of local brands that people may or may not have heard of, depending on whether they've been to the UK, like Mr. Sheen, Brasso, Silvo, Windoline. And we work, I'd say with almost all of the trade across the UK and Ireland business as well.
And it has the particularity, by the way, that Reckitt's headquarters is also in Slough. So it's not any other business unit. It's like the home base of the company, which does make a difference.
Absolutely. Although we split our business units across Slough and Amsterdam. So the Hygiene business unit is based in Amsterdam.
Okay.
Which is which is nice. It means I get to go to Amsterdam a couple of times a year. And also nice, I hope none of my business unit colleagues are listening, but it's also nice because it means they can't just walk down the road to see me.
That's important as well. And you have quite a big organization, I mean, like 200 people. That's a lot. And coming from all the experience that you just mentioned, from gradually stepping into leadership, you're now a very seasoned leader with all that experience from Russia and the UK and Amsterdam as well. I'm wondering, how would you describe your leadership style now after everything that you've been through? What is the kind of like your current, I wouldn't say end leadership because you're still evolving?
Yeah, that's a great point that you made just there. Like, I don't think I will ever stop evolving as a leader, kind of tweaking my style, figuring out what works, what doesn't work, and trying to get better. But I would say that, no matter how I lead, the first thing that's really important to me and that will always remain with me is authenticity. And I don't think it matters what kind of, I mean, it obviously matters what kind of leader you are. You can't be like mean. But as long as you are authentic, I think that you will be a good leader because people will feel drawn to you if you're natural and the way that you come across is natural. And I think one of the worst things that people do is try to be something that they're not when it comes to leadership. Like, if you're somebody that can stand up and inspire people, then, you should lean into that. And if you're somebody that works better by having small groups or influencing people and inspiring individually, then, you should lean into that. That's the way that you should lead. I think that's really important. And for me, I spent quite a lot of time on what authentic leadership means, to try and crystallize a kind of leader that I want to be. And in a way, it sounds like it should be something that's for others, but it's actually very selfish. It's about what I look like at my best so that I feel good about coming to work every day and so that I can get the best from the people around me as well. And I find that what allows me to be most authentic is to try and be an inspirational leader. So I have 4 values which I try to embody. The first one is transparency. And that really is the most important thing to me. I think it's the first thing I mention when I meet people and they ask about me, like what kind of person I am, and they want to get to know me a bit. I talk about transparency being a really core value of mine, because I find that it helps build trust faster than anything else. And so I expect it of my team. I embody it personally with my senior stakeholders, and I also tell my teams they should expect it from me. The second value that's really important to me is positivity. So I'm actually naturally quite a negative person, and I find it very easy to get into a negative spiral. So I'm always looking to build that positivity because I know that, psychologically I am at my best when I feel positive, when, I have those positive affirmations, but I can very easily spiral into negativity. So I try to maintain that positive mindset. My third value that I absolutely live by is to try and have fun. We spend a lot of time at work. And if it's not fun, then I really don't see the point in being here. So I try to have some fun. And finally, one that I think everybody can resonate with, which is respect. So I'd imagine this sits in most people's values. I want to be respected, and I try to also make sure that I am respecting those that I work with in return. And then on top of that, I suppose I would also describe myself as a purpose-driven leader. So my purpose is really what drives me. It's what gets me out of bed in the morning. And it's all about inspiring people to be successful in their own paths in life. So I think I've used the word inspiration or inspire multiple times in this answer. So you can kind of get the feeling that what I have found, has been successful for me in the way that I lead is around how I inspire the team, how I lead through inspiration.
Mm-hmm. And being transparent, being yourself sounds great, but is it possible to be yourself also in the good, bad moments, showing up to a certain point vulnerability with getting the results and earning that respect and credibility from both your team and your senior stakeholders?
Yeah, I think that is a really great question. And honestly, this is probably the thing that is on my mind most often. And it's where I've been focusing my own development as a leader over the last kind of 18 months or so. I think the two things, so, results and being a kind of authentic, transparent, vulnerable leader, I don't think these things can be mutually exclusive. And also, in the spirit of full transparency, I don't always get this right. I think, I've mentioned that I'm quite an action-oriented person. And of course, delivering results is also ultimately, the responsibility of a general manager and anyone really in an organization that is a money-making organization. We're here to get results. However that's defined for the company that you work for. So, and it's really easy to get the balance when the business is performing well. It's much more difficult when results are challenging. And personally, what I've found is there are a few things that I've tried to focus on. So first is to practice when things are going well. So, if you build the muscles of that kind of leadership that you want to embody while things are going well, then it's much easier to be able to practice those, when it's not going well, because you've already built that muscle, you know how to do it. Secondly, then recognize that different types of leadership are appropriate in different moments in time. So if, during a crisis, or if you need to dig the business out of a hole, a directive style is entirely appropriate. It's the kind of style of leadership that you probably need to embody in that moment, but that isn't sustainable for the long term. So you have to recognize when you're out of the crisis, or when you have dug yourself out of the hole and you're starting to rebuild momentum, then it's time to reflex your leadership style, to be more kind of coaching, affiliative. That's more appropriate in those moments. But throughout this, I find that transparency is absolutely critical. So, and I find that has to be really consistent. It's important that the people around me understand why I've switched the way that I'm leading the team. And what I try to do then, especially more recently, is sort of bring my leadership team in on that and tell them, like, this, I'm going to be changing. This is how I'm going to be leading this. And that's because of, X, Y, and Z. And so then you bring them in on that as well. And that, also helps you all to feel more like you're, in charge of the business, that you're understanding. And then finally, I would say it's really important in these instances as a leader to cut yourself some slack. So, because you won't be perfect all the time. And that's also fine. And what's important is that you recognize the moments where you're not embodying the leadership that you want to embody, but you catch yourself doing that, you recognize it, you understand why, and then, next time things will be different.
I guess it starts with being mindful and kind of like observing how you're living. You do this actively, and then you kind of take note, and then you can course correct whenever it makes sense to do so. And I love how you mentioned that you need to build the muscle while the business is actually doing well, which actually implies that there is a certain level of hard work required to build that muscle. While things, are doing well, you don't really have to try, but you really need to be doing this actively. Before you mentioned that you're also very much a purpose-driven leader. I'm really wondering, how do you find the purpose? Like, you don't work for the UN, you work in the FMCG industry. So how do you find purpose within your job?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think the first thing to note actually is that finding a purpose is not a quick process for most people. And also I feel like we place this like lofty definition on the word purpose, and all it really is about, what speaks to you as a person, inside and outside of work. And that for me is what caused the biggest tension, and why I actually found it really quite a long process to understand what my kind of personal purpose was, because something that resonated with me inside work didn't resonate with me outside of work. It was like, I want to make an impact. I think my first purpose statement was around making an impact. And then I thought, well, I actually don't care outside of work whether I make an impact or not. So then it was, okay, that needs to evolve and change. And I would say that, it's really something you could start working on at any point in your life, career. Because it's probably going to change over time. What's important to you when you're in your early 20s may not be what's important to you when you're in your 40s or your 50s. What's important to you before you have kids may not be important after you've had kids. Like, so your what's important to you, what your purpose is going to change over time. Essentially, for me, what your purpose should answer two questions. So, what makes you spring out of bed every day, happy and motivated? It can't just be what gets you out of bed in the morning, because that could be, well, I need to go to work to earn a salary to pay my bills, right? It has to be, if I spring out of bed, if I'm happy, I'm really excited, what is it that you've got going ahead in your day that's going to make you feel like that? And secondly, over a broader period of time, so if you think about a week, when you've had a great week, what does that look like? Like, what does a great week look like? What are the things that would make that a really positive experience for you? And I think you start by understanding the kind of person you are, what you like. When you're at your happiest, what does that look like? Then understand mental energy and where you get that from. And for me, that was where I spent a lot of my time. Like, what actually gives me energy? Beyond things like nutrition and exercise, but societally, what gives me energy? And then I started crafting these things into a phrase. Then you sort of live with that phrase for a few months and then go back to it and see if it still resonates with you. And if it doesn't, then you need to tweak it. And if it does, great. You live with it for a few more and then you go back to it again. And if you had a job, that one of the questions I asked myself actually when I first started writing these like purpose statements and thinking about whether they made sense to me or not was, if my job was only focused around this, if there was nothing else in my job, it was just this, would that make me fulfilled or not? And if it would, then great. That's probably a really good purpose statement. And if it wouldn't, then you probably need to look at it again. And you sort of craft and tweak over time and you repeat that. And I think the most important thing is you will never answer this question sat in the office. You will answer the question at home, when you're out on a walk, when you're out for a run, when you're chatting with friends, when you're, when you get yourself into a kind of different environment, but sat at your desk, you're never going to answer the question. And then the final thing to say is, I think, there's been a lot of emphasis placed in recent years on finding your personal purpose and how that's a really important part of the leadership journey. And I would say, controversially, if you don't know why you do what you do, I don't think it matters.
Well, I think that a lot of it is also, if you find something, I heard something the other day, I think it was on a LinkedIn post, like, don't go like career-wise where your passion is, go where you're good at, to the things you're good at. So that also can be a way to go, because I think that sometimes we put so much emphasis on like living your purpose and living your passion that can generate a degree of frustration, because this, of course, we do spend a lot of time working, but if it's fun, then you can also follow like your purpose and passion outside of work. No, maybe your purpose and passion is to have a big family or to give back to society. And there's a lot of time and a lot of opportunities to do that. And it doesn't need to be strictly related to your work, I think, no?
I think that's a great reflection. I think as long as, on balance, you're able to live whatever your why is, the majority of the time, it doesn't matter whether that is at work or outside of work or where it is. What's important is that you're able to do it, because if you're not able to do it, you will find that over a period of time, you really start to get quite miserable.
Yeah.
And so that's, for me, is why that purpose is, for me, it's been really important, because it's helped me to shape, what roles do I want to do? What career do I want to have? Where do I want to put my focus and emphasis and my time? The reason I think I mentioned that if you can't crystallize it into a statement, it's not the end of the world, is because as long as you feel like happy and fulfilled, and what you're working towards, if that makes you happy and fulfilled, and you kind of know where you want to be and what you want to do, having it crystallized into a little sentence really doesn't matter. It's more about the feeling that's important.
Yeah. Christina, you were looking with an interesting face. Keen to hear your thoughts as well.
I was just thinking recently I've seen a lot of posts around the whole ikigai thing, the Japanese notion of where you do this venture and you gotta put like where you're good at, what you like doing, and then how you can also make a living because you obviously need to be making money. And kind of the intersection of all these is supposed to be kind of that golden spot where you're supposed to go after. Which I think it's all really nice and fun also, and very, um, how can I say, visionary in a way on a personal level. But I love where this conversation is going, right? So you don't need to have the ultimate balance figured out and crystallized into a sentence which you can perfectly articulate to whomever asks. No, it's okay as long as you feel good with waking up every day and think that you are happy and you're living your life, regardless of that being your profession or your personal life. I think it felt some way too many frameworks around us that we
Yeah.
have to kind of fill in.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the way that the companies are set up, and I think that the world is set up today, your job today will not be the same in 2 years, even if you stay in the same role. So you can't like really stay enamored of that context that you have because that will change. So yeah, and we've seen that. Steph, very interested to hear from you. You grew up in, as you said, you thought you'd be a marketeer. You grew up in sales, and let's say it, a woman in sales, which is unusual. And I can tell you at the more senior levels, it's also unusual. I mean, also you're a GM now. It's also unusual to have a woman GM and basically in the so-called P&L role. So how have you found it, like being a woman in sales and maybe also not having as many role models of people that maybe you found relatable to you?
Yeah. It's been interesting for most of my career, I have to say. I got very used to being the only woman in the room. And unfortunately, I still am often one of very few women in the room at industry events. I have to say, it's incredibly rare at Reckitt now that I am in a minority in any of the rooms that I'm in, which is fantastic. But when I spend time at industry events, particularly when it's like senior stakeholders only, I generally find there's a lack of diversity in those groups. I sit in a couple of industry groups actually where I'm the only woman. It makes me very sad. But that's not to say the industry hasn't changed significantly, because it has in terms of where I started, especially on the attitude to that. So I think the key difference that I would say is that now when I am the only woman in the room, there are generally people who are talking about trying to find a way to change that. So it will be an active conversation, not one that I bring up either. It'll be from, the men in the room saying, we haven't got enough women in this group. We need to, create more of a balance. And that I really appreciate. Whereas the big difference to when I first started is nobody was bothered that were the only woman in the room. And they didn't really understand, there was no sort of general recognition that potentially we're not getting the most diverse thoughts in this group, that there's probably a lot of groupthink, that we all are saying the same things and we're not getting a different perspective. Whereas now there's a real recognition that if you don't have women in the group, or if everybody is from the same race or ethnic background, or you don't have somebody with a disability, or you don't have some aspects of diversity in your group, you're just going to get people who think very similarly. And that is going to be an issue for the discussion. It means you won't have rich conversations. It means you won't have, the challenging dynamic that you really need to have. Role models is super interesting. So I don't recall having specific women role models when I kind of grew up in sales in the UK. But what I have learned about role models is that you will never find someone who is the perfect embodiment of what you want to be. So what I've started doing, I'd say sort of over the past 5 years, is finding people who are great at something I also want to be great at, and then looking at them as a role model for that specific thing. So this person is really great at balancing their work and life. This person is a great presenter and I would love to present like them. This person is incredible, inspirational, like leader and speech maker, and I want to take that from them. This person's brilliant at influencing. I want to take that from them. And I look and I pick all those bits and pieces from different people. And I find that to be really valuable. And obviously then when you start looking at it like that as well, as a woman in this industry, I can pick from both men and women. So the pool of where I look to my role models gets bigger. But I do have I am not naive to the phrase as well that you cannot be what you cannot see. And that representation really matters in the industry. And it's incredibly important that not only do we have diversity within the industry, both for gender, but for all aspects of diversity as well. It's important that those elements of diversity are visible.
And it is very encouraging that, as you mentioned, now people start paying attention and they understand the value of diversity, and they are actually at least bringing it up, right? And we're having these conversations. I'm wondering from your side, Steph, now that you have a seat at the table, you're in a leadership position, how do you approach diversity and inclusion, and what is it that leaders can do in their organizations to help promote it?
I mean, what a great question, because so often people are very vocal and then they aren't doing anything. So I really love that you're kind of holding me accountable. What is it that you're doing for diversity? There are a few kind of ways that I think about diversity and inclusion within my organization, and that, also broadly within the overall Reckitt strategy on diversity and inclusion, which is quite comprehensive. So the reason I talk about diversity and inclusion together is because for me, the two have to go hand in hand. So inclusion really is an enabler of diversity. Without people feeling though they can be themselves at work, you can strive for diversity, but it's not going to stick, because if people don't feel comfortable, they're not going to stay. So it's important that the two go hand in hand. There are a few ways I'm personally trying to do this. So I head up the inclusion board for the UK&I region in totality. So that includes both our commercial business, but also our manufacturing sites and our R&D centre. And as part of that, we're constantly implementing things like events, driving awareness, driving training as well to make Reckitt a more inclusive place to work. We organise the inclusion strategy in two main pillars within the UK. So people and brands are the two pillars that we look at. And on people, we have what we call employee resource groups. And we have several. So we have women at Reckitt, LGBTQ plus at Reckitt, race and ethnicity, disability. And this year we're trying to establish as well a work stream on social mobility, which is something I know that a number of other companies have been doing for a few years, and we are probably a little bit late. But for us, we had this realization that a number of aspects of diversity can be tackled through creating more social mobility into the organization, particularly through recruitment and acquisition of talent. So that's super important as well. There are some aspects of diversity then as well that we're making great strides on. So, for example, we have a gender balanced team in Hygiene. I think I have 55% women in my Hygiene organization. And I actually have a leadership team which is predominantly women, with all the big P&L roles held by women. So my finance director, sales director, marketing director, and supply services director are all women in the UK&I Hygiene business, which does lead to a lot of comments from people telling me that my leadership team is not gender balanced. Which I also,
to have the exception on the other direction is probably not a bad thing, no?
No, absolutely.
Kind of balances out the other 90%.
It absolutely does. I think the answer I normally give is when your leadership team is gender balanced, I will make my leadership team gender balanced. So that's a little bit of the response I normally give there. But, we still want to make bigger strides in other aspects of diversity. So in particular, we're placing a lot of emphasis at the moment on how we improve representation of race and ethnicity within the UK organisation, especially in commercial roles, and also how we increase representation of the disabled community within the organisation. So they're two aspects that I'm really personally focused on. This has come into kind of all parts of the business. So first, we're trying to measure where we are today, and then implementing kind of interventions on hiring, development, and progression processes to drive the change we want to see, and make the organisation representative of the community that we serve, and the consumers that we have as well. So, and I see my role in this to be absolutely ruthless on ensuring that it happens, and to lead by example. So I think I talked earlier about, leading from the front, leading by example is maybe something that takes a back step when you start to lead big organizations and you lead more from the back. But on this one, I think you have to lead. You have to lead by example. It has to be something that you embody personally, because a lot of the time what you're trying to do is convince people that they need to spend time on this when the results are not necessarily easy to see.
The results even, like it's not like in your KPIs a lot of times. So that's why people like put it in the back burner, I think, a lot of times as well.
Yes, exactly. And that's why I think as a leader, you have to really fly the flag for this topic, and it has to be high on your agenda, because if it's not, then, other people will also find a reason to put it lower down their agenda as well.
Yeah, because day-to-day life happens, right? Work happens, and people are very, very busy to pay attention to other things unless they see that this is very important for their leaders as well, and that's what they're doing. But you mentioned that you had kind of like two parts, the people, which you told us a lot about, but there is also the brands part. And I'm wondering, like, Reckitt brands are very much household names. So you have a lot of influence also on society. Do you think that it is possible to use brands to drive societal change in terms of diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, I absolutely do believe it is, and it should be as well. Not for every brand. I think that you have to find a societal challenge that you want to address, but it has to be authentic to the brand. There can't be too much of a leap. Otherwise, I think it's very inauthentic, and I think consumers don't really understand it. And then, it's not going to help you, and it's not going to help the topic either. So I think as an absolute minimum, our brands should and do help with representation. So, and every brand can do that. So the brand has to represent the community you serve and the community that you live within, I think. Beyond this, though, there's an opportunity for some brands to shine a light on topics that support and drive change. So we have a couple of really great examples in the UK. One is on our Nurofen brand, which actually sits in the health business unit. So not part of my portfolio, but a phenomenal example. So I'm going to give it. We created a brand strategy called See My Pain, which is rooted in insight that women are significantly less likely to have their pain diagnosed than men. And conditions which cause pain, like endometriosis, take much longer to diagnose than chronic conditions which predominantly affect men. Now, Nurofen has a right to talk about this because it's a portfolio of products which treat pain and inflammation. So, it shines a light on the issue, but also provides a potential solution to that issue. So we talk in this strategy about the gender pain gap, which is influenced by several factors. There's kind of a historical lack of medical research into women's specific pain. There's a lack of mandatory training for healthcare professionals on women's specific conditions in the UK. There's underlying gender bias in society, which obviously plays a big role. And then there's a broader gender health gap, which has been highlighted through work that the government in the UK has done as well. And that gender pain gap is a kind of a report that Nurofen has launched. I think we've done 2 now, and there'll be another one this year as well. But it's also important as a brand, when you take on something like this, that you tackle the wider societal challenge yourself as well. So we know that one of the biggest challenges is that women's health research is underfunded. So, which is why, as a business, we've also invested into, female-focused pain research and gender bias training for over 10,000 healthcare professionals in the UK as well. So it's about, walking the walk and talking the talk. Both are really important. I have another example as well, which is on our Vanish brand. So on this, we did a fantastic campaign last year that we've also run into this year called Me, My Autism and I. And where this comes from is about shining a light on the lived experience of the autistic community. So it's, making clothes live longer, which is kind of something that Vanish has been striving towards for a few years, can be absolutely fundamental to that community. So familiar clothing provides comfort to people who are autistic, and clothing sensitivity is something experienced by many autistic people, which means that keeping their clothes fresh for longer and maintaining the longevity of those can be incredibly important and real lifeline for people. We also discovered as we did this work that girls generally have to wait longer for an autistic diagnosis than boys. And that's also something we wanted to shine a light on as part of this work. And so we collaborated with our disability ERG with a couple of organizations, one called Ambitious About Autism in the UK, who we've partnered with for 2 years now. And we continually partner as well with an organization called Neurodiversity in Business in the UK, to make sure that we were being respectful to the topic, but also because one of the things we recognized as we started working on this is that we have a long way to go on being a neuro-inclusive organization ourselves. And so, we also need to be supporting our colleagues who are neurodiverse and making Reckitt an easier place to work if you are neurodiverse. And one of the wonderful things about doing the work on this campaign is that it's forced us to be better at that and to understand what we need to do differently and how we need to go about it. And now I have to say we are by no means perfect on this, but we at least know what we don't know. And we are making strides and moving forward. So that's also, a really great aspect of when you get your brands involved in a topic. It also allows you to become better at that topic yourself as an organization, which means you can make a positive impact for your team as well.
Yeah, and going back to the purpose part, I think it's a great way to a bit create a purpose of what you're doing day to day to have like an impact on society. Like my brother is actually in the spectrum of autism, so I can really relate to what you're saying. And it is true that companies are not really ready because I think that at least my brother has a lot of potential. He's super smart. But of course, the social aspect is the complicated part, no? So to raise awareness with that. And by the way, I love puns. So I have to say, apart from the mission, I love the gin, the pain gap. It's and there's no place like for puns like England, right? So
absolutely.
So I love that. Steph, so you've had an amazing career. I love this conversation because you gave a lot of examples, and I loved like the high level of self-awareness that you have, which I think is probably part of the secret. But if you had to give one piece of advice to yourself as you were starting your career out of university, what would that be?
This one is actually pretty easy for me. I get asked this question a lot, actually. And my answer is always the same. I would tell myself to be far more patient. So I think I spent like the first 5 years of my career constantly being like, what's next? What's next? What's next? And I would tell myself to just enjoy every role, enjoy every learning experience, enjoy the ride, rather than constantly looking for the next thing, because I think it drives a level of anxiety in you that is not healthy and not necessary.
This was Steph Lilley, GM Hygiene UK and Ireland at Reckitt. Christina, what are your takeaways from this conversation?
Oh, what an interesting conversation, Daniel. I mean, Steph is really a role model, one of those that we discussed looking after with her. I loved at the beginning how we started discussing a bit on leadership and how she distinguishes between becoming a manager of others and then a manager of managers, right? A leader of leaders. And I love how she talked about this being kind of a journey for someone, and it's got like both an exciting as well as a terrifying side to it, because you really need to do this mentality shift and understand how the beginning you're kind of like leading from the front, but then you need to take a step back and kind of like be the enabler for your team to succeed and have a lot of trust in your people.
Yeah, you have to be able to let go, basically, because when you're promoted within a company, a lot of times when you promoted to manage a team, it's within the same organization that you're already in. So part of like the responsibility that you had, you have to let it go to someone else. So you need that capacity of trusting that someone will do it as good as you. And there's this saying, that nobody will do it as good as you. But I think that in this case, there could be someone that does it better than you, and you need to be, like, as you said, more of a facilitator, no?
Yeah, the temptation is very high, to just jump on things and take control because you know how to do it. And at the end of the day, that's why you got promoted in the first place, most probably. So now you have to let go and find the ways to enable and inspire, as you also mentioned, other people to be able to do this for you and in your name.
Yeah. Also, I like that she has like a clear set of values, which I think is good. Like, even if you have to flex your leadership style, because you're gonna be managing different teams, things change, but to have like a clear set of values is good. She talked about transparency, positivity, fun, and respect. I thought that was very cool as like to have that as like a basic, no, as a ground rule.
You definitely see a person who has done a lot of work with themselves to figure things out about them as professionals, as a person, and as a leader as well. And I love how she mentioned results as well. So she said that you have to be both to bring results and be authentic. And those two things cannot be and should not be mutually exclusive at the end of the day. But as you mentioned, you will not always see yourself as the leader you would like yourself to be. And that's okay. Like, cut some slack. It's not going to always be perfect. You're going to make mistakes. And that's very true. We don't have to punish ourselves. We just need to make sure that we have our eyes open, we observe our behavior and the response of those around us, and then we adjust accordingly.
Yeah, exactly. Also, I love the part that when we talked about purpose, I thought that was like a very fun part of the conversation, like around. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just thinking, like, it's one of those cases where we got a really clear recipe for our listeners, right? So figure out one, what gets you up happy and motivated in the morning, not just what gets you to wake up, right? But to really get out of bed with a lot of energy. And then if you've had a great week, what did it look like? What would a good week look like for you? So it's about figuring out where your mental energy is coming from. And if you answer those questions, which is like two very specific things that you need to keep in mind, you can start crafting that little purpose statement. And it feels like in many cases, it's something very sophisticated, something that you might need to hire a coach or a consultant for. But it doesn't have to be. It can be quite simple, actually. And if you feel like you're there, you don't really need to distill it down to a very sophisticated thing.
Yeah.
It can be as simple as I'm feeling like I'm probably around where I want to be, even if I cannot articulate very clearly what that is.
Yeah, I'm just having fun at work, no, which I think is as she said before, is super important. I think I also like when we talk about like being one of the only women in P&L roles and how she deconstructed the part of role models. I thought that was very interesting. But sometimes I think we think of role models as like somebody that's to like fully represent what we want to be. And I thought it was super interesting and really realistic, like finding people that are great at something you want to be great at, but something specific, no? Maybe somebody that's very good at like managing senior stakeholders, or somebody that's very good at negotiation. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like that one person that you look up to and you really want to be like that person.
Absolutely. And that's how mentoring relationships work as well, right? So I'm part of a network of women where we do mentoring for other women. And it's you always need to have a very clear objective. So you reach out to another woman to be mentored on a specific thing. So it won't be like, you're my role model, I want to be like you. Help me be like you. But it will be something very specific, like, as you mentioned, stakeholder management. I'm facing this issue at work based on your experience in managing stakeholders. How can you guide me? And it feels kind of like the same thing. Find the role models where they're good at something that you want to excel as well and learn from them.
Yeah, totally. No, and I didn't know that mentoring worked like that, Christina. So it's an interesting one. In terms of gender balance, I also like the fact that she said that sales, marketing, supply, and finance, all women in her team, which is pretty unique.
Pretty unique and a great accomplishment. I hear more and more teams that are, let's say, imbalanced in the opposite way. So I'm really glad to see this happening.
That's the normal thing in the world.
Yes. And it helps even the scales a little bit right now. So well done to her. And it has a lot to do with kind of if you get more leaders that are women, then you will be able to get also more women overall in the leadership teams and then in the teams below, because we tend to hire also people that we are that are more like us, let's say, in a way, and we also want to work for those people. So C is the role model, effectively, that C was missing once it started.
Yeah, exactly. And finally, I think that the part of like, and that's something we hadn't really tapped into in the podcast yet, like using the brands to drive societal change. So that was a very interesting point, no?
It's a very interesting point, and even more because you mentioned a couple of examples like the gender pain gap.
Yeah.
As well as the Me, My Autism and I, right? These were the two campaigns, which seemed to be very well thought through and well constructed, right? So you need, as a brand, to do something that's authentic to the brand as well, so that you have the right to shine some light on the specific issue. Not every brand can do it. And this is where we've seen a lot of brands failing, actually, because they try to be more inclusive while they're not. You can take the example of, Victoria's Secret, or get the Bud Light example, right?
Yeah.
So you really need to be able to pull this through. And once you see brands actually doing that, then it's really powerful, because these are brands that are in every household, essentially, in every market that they are in. So you can really impact, first of all, how people are being and communities are being represented, but as well as how awareness is being built around certain issues. So I really love the work that they're doing around this.
Yeah, so did I. And as I said, I love the pun as well. So that's always a point in favor. Well, thanks, Christina, as always, for your takeaways. Thanks, Steph, for joining us. Thanks to our audience for listening in. And if you're new to the podcast, make sure you subscribe. Every Wednesday and every Saturday morning, you'll have a brand new episode. If you like the show, do leave us a review, because that will help other FMCG and retail professionals find us more easily, or easier. I don't know what the right word is. Anyhow, have a great day and thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in the next episode.